right, everyone. Welcome in to the Perrysburg Pulse podcast for February 22nd, 2022. And got a very special guest today, the king of the city, the dubbed king, or we call him a mayor as well, Mayor Tom Mackin. Good morning, Mr. Mayor. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Nice
Good.
to be here.
Nice to see you as well. Let's start with overall, just kind of your assessment of the city and where things are, kind of a state of the city type statement to open up.
Well, there's a lot of really good things going on, and I think that's a result of teamwork between the community and the elected officials and the hard work of the staff that works for the city. I mean, as an example, we were talking off air about it. Winterfest, it was a big hit. It was beautiful weather. It brought a lot of people downtown. It built a sense of community, and it was a really fun event. And that event is sponsored by Downtown Perrysburg Inc. with the support of its sponsors, including the Convention and Visitors Bureau. And the city supports that, but that's part of what makes Perrysburg really a great place to live. You have all these volunteers contributing to make that happen. And so I think that was really just an example of all the good things that happen. And we have had a lot of really similar type things in the last year. For example, the inclusive playground is another perfect example of where the community got behind a project, made it happen. The city officials helped and supported that, but it was really the community stepping up and saying that we see a need, we see the value to this, we see that certain parts of the community aren't being served, and so we're doing that. So there's lots of things like that, and I can talk about more specifics about what the city's doing, but I think that pretty much summarizes and is a good example of why Perrysburg is a great place to live.
Well, it is, and I mean, the population is showing that the population is exploding.
Oh yeah, I mean, the recent census data showed that we're now over 25,000 people. When I moved here in 1990, it was under 12. So in 30 years, we've doubled in size. And that's a result of people want to be here. A lot of communities in Northwest Ohio are not growing. We are, and I think that's because we're doing a lot of things right, and the community recognizes that. But I also think it's the community is doing a lot of things right, and that those feed on each other and make it a great place to live.
When you talk about the explosion of the population in Perrysburg, one of the things that came up a couple weeks ago was the water towers and keeping the design the same, and the old joke that the only black people you see in Perrysburg are the ones on the water tower. What are your thoughts, being the mayor, as far as maybe being more diverse? And in fairness to Perrysburg, there are a lot of suburbs that just aren't as diverse as they could be or should be, or I don't know why, but Waterville or Sylvania. I mean, everyone could probably say the same thing about most of the suburbs. Is that on your radar? Are there any efforts to make the community more diverse, or maybe to address some of that?
Well, I think there are. Let me talk about the water tower first.
Okay.
There's lots of kind of misinformation about it. Well, first, the water tower needed to be repaired. The EPA has reported that it needs to be repaired. So the substantial cost of the project is the repairs to the water tower. Now, I would venture to guess before the last month or two, when was the last time you talked about the water tower?
Never.
Never. Okay, so let's just put it as the water tower serves a utility function. It provides water to the community so that people can bathe, wash, and live in a quality of life.
Sure.
Okay, so the notion that the water tower is something that is often talked about is a critical part of what makes Perrysburg a great community. Let's put that aside because there is no data to support it. Because everybody I've talked to in the last week who said, "Hey, I really feel strong about the water tower," I said, "When was the last time you talked about the water tower?" And it was never, or it was in a bad light. So,
right.
So let's talk
obviously, about. Real quick, I'm sorry. Obviously, it's a sore subject for you because you were ready for this one.
Yeah, I thought about it, and it's been an issue. And second, okay, so the administration, which the mayor's leadership,
right?
We needed to make those repairs, and consistent with that, we were going to repaint it with the brand that we've been working on, It's the city of Perrysburg, and then it has our Stable, Ohio, with the P behind it.
Uh-huh.
Dull, not probably, but other water towers in Perrysburg just have Perrysburg. They really don't have anything else. So it was consistent with moving towards a brand. Now, the more expensive option, people raised concerns that was too dull. So this administration brought several different options, ranging it to raise the cost of the project between $25,000 and $50,000 because of paint. And you can't just use regular paint. I mean, this is not, going to the store and buying paint. So, but the council wanted something different, and has now authorized the expenditure to repaint those symbols. Now, I have a pretty strong feeling about that's not the best approach, and here's why. If the symbols, which themselves are not in any way derogatory or anything, show a community that welcomes family, that honors family, honors kids, and is a great, that's the attempt to show is a great place to live. And so why not practice that if you know that it has been the butt of jokes? And the jokes aren't necessarily towards people of color, but they are towards the community as a whole, not being open and inclusive to people of color. So why would we want to encourage that stereotype of Perrysburg when we have a chance to take a prop and a joke out of it? Now, the only people I heard talk about the water tower in the last 3 years were people of color who had heard the joke. And we're reasonable about it, but said it wasn't welcoming. So if we're going to be a diverse, open, inclusive community that invites people to live here, why wouldn't we remove that one thing? Get rid of the joke. And then, and I don't know about you, but I have heard people of color say, I'm not moving to Perrysburg because it isn't a welcoming community. So every step we can that we can reduce the barrier to make us a better community by being more inclusive, I think we should take that advantage. And in this case, it is a better use of tax dollars because it will be less than the current option, which everybody also complains about. My utility rates are too high. My taxes are too high. Well, so we're trying to do something that isn't glamorous, but is effective. And I think my administration is also trying to do other things that are inclusive and inviting to make the community a better place to live for everyone who lives here. Because since I've been mayor, we have had hate painted on windows, painted on garages, painted in bathrooms at schools, and there's no place that should be tolerated. So to answer your question, I got an answer.
Okay. Well, real quick before you get to the answer, so what did you want on the water tower?
Oh, basically, and again, there's another thing that people don't quite understand is this is a utility fund. It can't come out of general funds. It's being come by utilities. I think a very straightforward, consistent with our branding logo that we've been trying to implement. A nicer version of City of Perrysburg with the state of Ohio and the P. There's some other versions of that have been suggested. Those are fine too, and they're not.
There's some sort of branding for the city. Like you drive through, you drive 475, you go through Springfield, you see above the walkway there, it says Springfield. I think Springfield Township or whatever it says. But just something that's the branding of the city. I mean, you did a really good job, I felt, on the 475 where you have those sign, the big sign that you put up says Perrysburg. I mean,
I think people like that. And then again, it's a water tower. People don't spend money in Perrysburg. They don't stop in Perrysburg because of the water tower. They may recognize it when they drive by, but there's no data to show people are stopping in Perrysburg because of that. There's no. So it's a water tower. But if that's our biggest problem, we have things to address. But we're doing pretty well.
No, that's a great point as well. And I know that being mayor, and I'm friends with many politicians, and it's a hard job because you have to balance the old way of thinking with new way of thinking. It's very hard to be progressive. It's hard to get everyone on the same page. It's like herding cats. It's hard to
Oh,
get everyone
yeah.
on the same page. So I know it's frustrating when all right, this is the way it's always been done. Okay, well, you can do it different. Oh, but this is the way you have to people. This is the way it's always been done.
Well, and I would say on that and some other things, the change is hard.
Yes.
Just the notion of change and the notion we've always done it this way, it is comfortable and probably was successful. But to continue being successful, and I would say analogy that I just heard the other day, that Sears was successful last century. Amazon is essentially the new Sears. You can
Right.
buy, and you don't get a catalog, but you essentially have a catalog online
On your phone. Yeah.
and on your phone. And so to be successful now doesn't mean you'll be successful in the future unless you keep up to date and change. And I
Yes.
think one of the things that made Perrysburg successful is that the core of the community cared about their neighbor. Again, this goes back a little bit to the water tower,
Hmm.
but if you care about your neighbor and something is offensive to your neighbor, do you keep doing it? If your neighbor says, "Hey, I that kind of bugs me," it's not, why would you just change it to be a better neighbor, to be a good person? And so,
Mr.
I,
Mayor, Mr. Mayor, we are mind melding here. I've been saying that forever. If it doesn't affect me, but it makes someone else feel bad or uncomfortable, and I don't care about it, it doesn't matter to me. Well, just change it. It's just being a good neighbor. It's
right, and
that's all it is.
but I think that the converse of that is we do so many things as a community well,
Oh yeah.
but sometimes people get, you know, things come up and it's change, and so change can be hard, change can be difficult, and that's something as the leaders of the community we have to do a better job always of explaining why change is beneficial to them and to the community at large, and will make us keep us as a community that's growing and thriving, because there
Well,
are a lot of communities in Northwest Ohio that are not
they're not.
growing and are not
Right.
thriving.
Well, and I appreciate the open and honest discussion as well, and the candor in it. Taking it one step further, I have a lot of friends in Toledo, or a lot of Black friends, and like you said, they don't feel many of them don't feel welcome in Toledo. Like they'll say, if you go to the Funny Bone Comedy Club, which has a lot of urban targeted comedians, so it brings in an urban crowd from outside. They don't feel comfortable coming to Perrysburg, or they feel that they're going to be targeted when they drive out of Levis Commons. And it's kind of going with what you're saying. Maybe how do you take steps to become more welcoming to a more diverse set of people?
Well, I think that's probably a question that goes to the bigger notion of how, as a society and a community, we're more welcoming to our neighbor who doesn't look like us, or isn't the same as us, listens to different music than me, knows more about certain things than me, or is different than me. I think one of the first things we have to do as elected officials is make sure we listen to all sides of the discussion, to make sure that we are actually listening to what people are saying. And we have people who, and I know exactly what you're talking about. Some people have conveyed that to me. They love coming to Perrysburg. They love going to Funny Bones or some this or that, but they're not sure that they feel welcome. And so that's a perception that maybe isn't warranted, but there certainly is perception. Perception can be a reality. So how do we address that? We make sure as what we can control as the administration, as elected officials, and as community leaders, as business owners, that we are more welcoming. That, for example, welcoming has lots of different things. Like, for example, we're working on making both city buildings and private businesses in downtown more ADA accessible.
Mhm.
Now, it's a different kind of welcoming,
Mhm.
but if you don't have access into a building, you're not going to shop there. So we should be doing something to make that more accessible. Similarly, there should be City Hall was built in the 1960s and is not that accessible to somebody who has some disability, physical disability. We have to address those kind of things, because that's where government gets done. And so we have to make sure that we make it accessible. So that's one part of it. We also have to do it in race relation issues. Are the police department getting trained in such a way that this is not going to be an issue? I'm very comfortable with our police department and Chief Jones we have worked on. I mean, there's been a lot of issues about race in police departments, not in ours.
Hmm.
And so we want to make sure that our police are trained, that they have the right equipment. For example, we just bought a whole bunch of new tasers. Unfortunately, tasers are needed by the police department in certain circumstances. Well, our tasers that we used to have were black. Now they're this really, 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 I can't describe how bright the yellow is. But we know that there was an incident where somebody used the wrong thing.
Right.
So let's make it easier for our police. Let's train them up as best as possible so that they're not in these situations. But that also means that they're learning skills to de-escalate. And so there are
Mhm.
lots of things that we can do that aren't glamorous, that aren't in the news every day, and you won't know we're doing it because nothing will have happened.
It's
So
it's
I
great.
think that
It's
this
great.
was
It's great to hear about some of that proactive stuff that, like you said, it only gets spotlighted when negative things happen. To know that you're out in front of some of these things is really refreshing to know. What about taking the next step? It sounds like I mean, you're a great thinker. It sounds like, it's our first discussion, but I love that. What are your thoughts on police having to be domestic counselors and deal with mental health and do all these other things? Is there ever a topic with or a conversation with the law enforcement of maybe some sort of community policing or some sort of other programs to take some of that burden off the police that have to do everything and have to be you have to wear 10 different hats to be an officer?
Well, that's a good question. I appreciate you asking. There's a couple parts of that. One is we already do a lot of community policing, like we have the school resource officers in
Mhm.
schools, and a lot of that is. And a matter of fact, our school resource officer just received an award for the way he was working in a junior high. We have one in this high school as well. It's important for the police to see the students as people, and for the students to see the police as people, and not just a police officer. So there's lots of things that we're already doing in conjunction with the schools that make that kind of community, that connectivity and relationship building an important part of what we're doing. Um, we don't really have the staff to provide a mental health person, and let me take it a little bit different direction with that. Mental health issues are a huge part of some of those issues that we're facing from police and from housing and from a whole bunch of different issues. So the first part of that is we have to be able to openly, honestly talk about mental health problems.
Hmm.
Secondly, we have to work on solutions to that, because that's the kind of situation that creates a whole bunch of other different problems, and can lead to more serious issues. And there's connectivity to some of this, to alcoholism and domestic violence and some of these other connectivity that support the wraparound services. Police officers are go into so many difficult situations. Police
Mhm.
often say that they're the people who see people at their worst on their worst day.
Right.
So how do we make it so that the police don't have to be the Swiss Army knife of providing police protection, safety to the community, mental
Very
health
counseling.
services? Who could do that? I'm not qualified to do half of that,
No.
and so I wouldn't expect a police officer just out of police academy to be able to do that either. So we
Mhm.
have to think about different ways to do that, and I think that's a broader discussion. We have to also fund it. I think the first part of that is making sure that we're aware of the problem, and I think that's where we are at least the governmental functions with the county and county agencies. How do we deal with these kind of issues? So we're talking about them, we're working through them, but it's a very complicated issue, and people want solutions today. But these problems have been around for a long time. They're also not flat. They have different levels. They have different parts, and
Sure.
so we have to talk about them in a way that requires us to work through the different steps. So that was a long answer to say we're working on it.
No, it's great. I love it. So let's talk about switch gears. There are a lot of, especially if you look where the old French Quarter is, the old Holiday Inn French Quarter, a lot of big chain restaurants that have been announced that are coming in. What are your thoughts on, and how do you balance big chains versus local moms and pops? Like I see, a Mexican chain coming in. I'm like, man, we have 3 or 4 great Mexican restaurants here, and that's going to hurt those. Or there's other. There's like 2 or 3 chains in my head, as being a small struggling business owner who's failed many times, and I know how hard it is. I always think that, oh man, we were bringing these chains in. We have these great local guys, and they're not all going to survive. And these big guys have all the money to wait it out. Is that ever part of your discussion?
Well, yeah, and it's also goes to the whole the French Quarter is in the township and not in the city or in my
No.
control, which we have holes. But that's one that goes to the notion of how do you support businesses? For example, in Perrysburg itself, we welcomed 44 new businesses. Most of those are mom and pop, small, locally owned businesses owned by local community members, and they make a difference because in Perrysburg, for example, Rick Ruffner has, basically started the car show on Fridays, and that's brought people downtown. And so O'Dear Diner, of course, gets a financial benefit from it, but that's basically been his, so his investment in the community is worth recognizing. The same with Mr. Freeze has always been a good local support, but so have also some local businesses that are much bigger and much more successful. Last year, we celebrated Master Chemical Solutions, or Master Fluid Solutions. Used to be Master Chemical, now it's Master Fluid Solutions. For that, they've been in Perrysburg a long time, and they are a really world. They sell internationally. They do business internationally. They have state-of-the-art technology. Most people don't know they exist, but they're been a good community steward as well. And so we have to make sure, as part of our efforts, that we're being proactive to support local businesses. But on the other hand, national and regional businesses have also invested in Perrysburg, and we want to be open to them. For example, last year, ProMedica broke ground on a big new facility. Mercy expanded its hospital.
Center, yeah.
Peterbilt and Cat invested $40 million in this community. So part of that is you have to be proactive. And I guess I would say there's 2 things to that. One is we're developing a land use plan with the conjunction with the community that, make sure that there's opportunities for investment in the community from new businesses. And that also means that there's opportunity for local businesses to expand. The other part of that is when a business comes knocking on a door, new, big, small, or whatever, the operations of the city have to be businesslike and professional. We have gotten a lot of comments about how well, like the planning and zoning office or the finance department, how quickly they respond to getting information, that the information is accurate and helpful, and that they're willing to sit down and talk and work through. So instead of being kind of that speed of government, work at the speed of that the business expects, and do it in a way that's professional and helpful so that they can get through the hurdles. And there are hurdles to moving or doing or building. There's zoning codes, there's building codes, there's a whole bunch of things that Peter built. And I think that was very successful, partly because they were very professional and they came in with an idea and a plan and knew the rules and complied with the rules. But we were also able to say, hey, you want to do this, we can help you do that. We can do this, we can get these variances for this and that. And it was really a collaboration. And maybe that's the best part of what Perrysburg does. We collaborate with schools, we collaborate with businesses, we collaborate with other partners in Wood County. And that's why we're being successful.
Because you do hear, I know a lot of business owners in Perrysburg and outside, and you don't hear that. What you're saying right now, you don't hear some of that in some of the other cities. The city is an adversary, or the government is an adversary to what they're trying to do instead of a partner, or maybe being helpful. And maybe that's why that's why Perrysburg has been so booming. Maybe some of that formula, some of the other municipalities could take to maybe be a little more successful, because you can't drive around Perrysburg and deny that business is booming, and things are moving and shaking for sure.
Well, yeah, I think you drive around Perrysburg, just even their day. I drove around because of the snow, and the guys in the street division did a great job getting it off the roads quickly. Had a lot of compliments about that. And those are the little things,
Hmm.
but they are big things. And they make people were out going to business. So there's lots of, I think that it's important that you just pay attention to detail. And I think that that's something we've been really able to do. A lot of it, a lot of it is, again, because of the community leadership and because of a whole bunch of different people care and are interested in making sure things work well and collaborate. And they'll also, if there's something not getting done well, we're still a little bit of a small town. We're not as small as we used to be, but people will let me know. I'll get texts from people, and most of the time they're not, or I'll get stopped at Walt Churchill's Market or something, and they're not stopping to be mean or critical, but they're saying, "Hey, did you know?" And
Right.
so there's lots of opportunity there. Then, okay, hey, thanks for letting me know, and then we do it better the next time.
Really, only two complaints I got when I said that I was going to be speaking to you, and I think one of them is
About the mayor himself.
yeah, we can get rid of that guy. No, taxes and water. The high
Yeah, and
water.
about well, first off, our taxes are city of Perrysburg hasn't raised its taxes since the early 1970s. So our taxes haven't increased. What most people are concerned about are property taxes, which are county levied, and you know what I tell people when they talk about taxes is, well, what do you want for your services? For example, uh, garbage pickup. Do you want people who have limits on your garbage pickup? Do you want people, our people who work the trucks will stop if they see you bring in the garbage can out after they've driven by your house, and will either let you bring it to us, or they care about making sure the run is done well, as opposed to maybe you have to contract it out where there's a limit on capacity, where you can't just throw your old couch or old carpet out on the floor without getting things. So there are things
Real
like
quick,
that.
I just want to add to that. I mean, there aren't a lot of municipalities where you can just throw your big stuff out on the side, and there's going to be another guy coming behind the trash guy and picking it all up for you and not cost anything and not have,
Well,
like you
yeah.
said.
And do you want, like, the snow removal was done well on time, and the roads were pretty clear, even though it was a pretty difficult situation with ice. I mean, that costs money to have the equipment, to have the people trained, to have the staff that's experienced. So there's a balance. Nobody likes paying taxes. I mean, everybody, I totally get that. But do you want the things that are the quality of life that come to Perrysburg? You come to Perrysburg because of the schools, because of the sense of community and the sense that things are done well. Well, that requires a cost.
Yeah.
The water rates are expensive. And we entered into a regional agreement with Toledo and the other communities in last couple of years, and it just made a whole lot of sense. A lot of people say, "Well, build a new plant or go to Bowling Green." Well, the cost of doing those options wasn't it was cost prohibitive. I mean, you could do the math. We did the math. We tried to present that to the residents and say, look at here's the cost of laying pipe and doing things at Bowling Green, and how much Bowling Green would have to increase its capacity to service Perrysburg because we're as big as Bowling Green.
Right.
Well, there's lots of different costs. So, and why wouldn't you get water from the biggest lake around? I mean, just I think there were some things that happened. That's the other part of the deal that I think has kind of gotten lost in the shuffle, is that one of the conditions that Perrysburg, Maumee, Sylvania, other regional partners who used to be Toledo was the big dog, and then the regional partners were tiny. Well, the regional partners now are essentially equivalent to Toledo in a lot of ways, given you added them all up.
Mm-hmm.
We said we wanted it managed by professionals, and that there was going to be an administrative body set up, and the people running the water plant were not going to be political type people. And that's really worked very well. There's a panel that we sit on, just like the other communities, and it's our water utility person. It's our director of the utilities department is on that board, and they're discussing the things that should be discussed when you're trying to provide water to a region. not how it's going to have a political impact. And I think that that was a compromise from the city of Toledo. It was a little bit of a compromise on all the other parts, but that stability, and we think that the stability has been helpful in attracting business, because every businesses want to know certainty, they want to know costs, they want to know what the cost of doing business is, and that certainty, I think, makes sense.
Do you like doing the job?
Most days, some days not. Some days people
Right.
are
Oh,
not. It's not productive.
sure.
Reading Facebook posts is not productive. So I generally
Oh,
do not do
I'll tell
that.
you, I'll tell you what, Mr. Mayor. When I was going through my issues within the city, and you read the news stories, and you're the front page on all the pages or whatever, and then and the coverage is usually pretty fair. But my wife at the time, my ex-wife, as you read the comments, you're like, man, people hate me. I can't be more hated. I'm the most hated. She said, stop reading the comments, get out and live your life. And as you start to get out, you're like, oh, maybe people don't all hate me. It's like social media can be so nasty.
Well, and I think that's by you want people to be involved. You want people to have opinions, but you
Sure.
also have to take it with a grain of salt that
Yeah.
it's easy to type something. It's hard to go make a difference and be productive.
Yeah.
I told somebody, hey, when you type the criticism, did you add a solution? It'd be very nice if you added a, but it is what it is. It's part of what, it is what it is. It's
I
just
like
like, it's just like people used to write letters to a messenger journal. It's part
Well,
of the process.
and it's great. It's like you said, just don't offer criticism because because your solutions, you have to make the best of the solutions that you have available. And sometimes people don't know. It's like you said, hey, we did the math for Bowling Green when it comes to water, and it wasn't cost effective. So maybe you don't like the rates, and maybe you don't like us going through Toledo, maybe you don't like this and that. But of the options, that was the best option. So when you criticize, you got to realize at least, hey, we did the best. We did the best we had with the information that we had.
Well, and I think that consistent with that is the notion that, and I was on the council 17 years, and then I've been the mayor now, and just got reelected. This is my 5th year. For the most part, I would say that every elected official who I've come in contact with in the city of Perrysburg, school board, city, the number one question is, how do I best serve the city or the community of Perrysburg? And so partisanship was never an issue before. It's trickled down a little bit now. I think that's the nature of where we are as a society. But everybody, I think, is working for the best interests of Perrysburg. So even if we disagree on whether a street should be repaved or something should be expanded or this or that, that disagreement is not personal. It's not going to carry over. You move on to the next discussion. Like, for the example, for the water tower, I think we should do something, and I've been strongly for that. Council voted another choice. I'm going to continue to say this is my preference,
Right.
but I'm not going to hold it against the 7 people who I think have the same passion for the community that I do in their decision-making process.
It's so refreshing when you see like national politics nowadays and you see how nasty it is. It's so refreshing just to hear you speak. It's like, hey, I don't agree with you, but I like you. We all got the best interest. We have something different, but hey, this is where you guys are going with it. This is where you're going with it. I'm with you. I'm like, well, why continue to rate? If you know there's a joke out there, why continue to remind people that it's still being up there? Why not get rid of that? But I'm with you. But like you said, hey, that I said what I had to say. The people spoke, and that's it. We move on to do something else.
Yeah, and we have other things to move on because it is
Absolutely.
really a water tower, and we have other issues, and we can learn from this. We need to, because people haven't denied it in a joke. People haven't said that joke isn't out there,
Right?
And it isn't. The joke is not. The joke has been targeted. Sometimes you hear that the joke is this reference to a particular person being diverse, but it's really a joke about the community. The community could do better, so let's do better.
Amen, man. Last thing, if you were King Mackin, and were the be all end all, what is the one thing that probably couldn't get done, but you're like, if I was king for a day, this would get done?
I don't know the answer to that. I've never really thought that way. There are some things. There are some things we've always done this way
Right.
in City Hall that I think we're moving away from. We're moving towards newer technology. I guess I would say, and I know the administrative staff has heard me rail against the use of paper because we've always, we could cut down some costs and we could do it better by using electronic technology more effectively. We could reduce the amount of paper, and we would just, and for example, when I became mayor, we didn't have, if the pandemic had happened or the minute I became mayor, we would have not been able to perform some of our city operations because we didn't have the technology. So I was pushed for the technology to be used. And we were essentially able to carry on the day-to-day business of the city and the operations without missing a beat to residents. We had to close some buildings and things, but people were still able to communicate with us. And we found some things we actually did better because we were forced to, because we didn't do it the way we'd always done it, and because the technology was there. So I think that if I, and I know that the administration staff rolls their eyes when I start talking about less paper, which is totally legitimate. But so if we could continue to serve residents better using that, and then I guess the other thing, if I really had control, kind of as a more global sense, that we as a community would be viewed as more inclusive, that we would be more welcoming, and then we do steps to, I think people feel that way. If you live in Perrysburg your entire life, you think it's a welcoming, inclusive place. I think most people who move here because of the schools and they want to feel part of a community. And if you go again to Riverfest or the inclusive park, there is a sense of community that isn't often existing in other communities around, and they're trying to copy Perrysburg. But in the sense of doing that, we do it on a big scale. And I know people do it to their neighbors. During the pandemic, there's lots of examples of people playing it forward to their neighbor who lost a job or needed help or had a sudden death of somebody because of the pandemic. If we could do those things consistent with what we espouse and what we imagine ourselves, I think we could really move forward even to be an even a better community.
I agree. Mayor Mackin, thank you so much for your time, man. I really appreciate it. It was a great conversation. I appreciate your open and honesty. And really, like I said, a lot of refreshing stuff. We haven't met before. And just hearing when you hear some of the vitriol in some of the national politics and maybe even some of the surrounding communities, just to hear your thoughts on things in the politics wise and all that stuff is really refreshing to hear. And I appreciate you taking time to talk to us today.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you, my friend, Mayor Tom Mackin, on the Perrysburg Pulse podcast. Broadcast Hippo production. We'll see you guys next time. Bye, everybody.
I'm a hippo.
Broadcast Hippo.